This is Chef Kas coming to you live from the Kitchen of Awesomeness, Cooking with Chef Kas series number 307. Today we're going to be making some braised goat curry. If you're not familiar with goat, it's an animal. Sometimes found on farms, other times found in Bangladesh. And what we want to do first is we're going to sear our goat meat in the oven. I've got a roasting rack set up here, a little bit of aluminum foil underneath. What that's going to do is just catch our drippings so we can use that, or we can just easily discard it instead of having extra cleanup. I'm going to put the top rack on, and this is where all my oil and grease and all the stuff that comes off of the meat while it's searing. Searing, remember, is a cooking process at a very high temperature to develop color and lock in the juices. So while the meat is searing, it's going to drip everything into the pan, and you could use that to make a gravy if you like, but for now, because we're going to be doing this as a stew, as a curry, as a braise, we are not going to worry about all that. We could add it back in though if we wanted to. Next, I'm going to spray my pan just to, again, make cleanup a little bit easier for me, and also make it really nice to get the pieces of goat off of my roasting rack. I want to make sure that the meat is face up. A lot of these you can see is on the bone, and bones are really nice for adding flavor. The other thing that bones will do is they'll keep the meat a little bit more tender, so when you pull it, when you have it served onto your plate out of your curry pot or your whatever you're cooking in, your vessel, all of the meat is going to basically fall off the bone, and where it was attached to the bone is going to be super tender. And it just produces a really nice effect. There's also marrow in the bone, and if you're familiar with, I believe, Henry David Thoreau, and if you've ever seen the movie Dead Poets Society, they use that phrase often in that movie of suck the marrow out of life. And the marrow is actually a very tasty, flavorful part of the animal. Again, we don't eat bone very often, or we don't use bones very often, but if you think about like a Native American culture or some of the more indigenous cultures that would use the whole part of the animal, the marrow is actually regarded as a very important and valuable part. Next step is we're going to sear our goat meat. If you're not familiar with searing, there's two ways to do it. Searing is always a dry cooking process. If you don't really know what dry cooking process is, it means there's no moisture. So in a dry pan or in a preheated oven. You're going to heat your oven at home to the maximum temperature it's going to allow. If you have a convection oven, you're going to put it on convection. Okay, circulate the air inside and keep a more even cooking temperature throughout the oven. So we've got our goat all arranged on our roasting rack. Open this quickly. My oven is preheated to 550. Stick it in there, and we're going to look for that to get a nice dark brown, almost black, but we don't want to burn it. When we pull it out, we'll see what it looks like, but it's going to sit in there for a good 20 to 30 minutes before we're ready to move on to the next step. So you want to be checking your goat meat periodically until it's developed a nice brown seal on the outside, almost a crispiness. This is going to be to develop flavor and also to lock in the juices. You want to allow that to cool slightly before moving on to your next step. Next, we are going to add some sauteed mushrooms. We're going to make some sauteed mushrooms, and we're going to add those to our curry for braising our goat. Now, we got some interesting types of mushrooms here today. These are brown biche, these are enoki, and these are not to be confused with gnocchi, and these are oyster mushrooms. If you accidentally confuse enoki with gnocchi, that could be an interesting experience. Now, mushrooms in Chinese culture and medicine are actually known for having various properties of awesomeness. And what's pretty cool about that is when you use different types of mushrooms, you get different types of awesomeness. And I just want to get as many types of awesomeness as I, Chef Kas, personally can. So we're going to heat up our pan, and in this case we're going to be using like a wok sort of pan. You can see that this thing is really thick all around, which is going to make for really good heat absorption, which is going to be how we transfer the energy into the food and cook it. And what also is good about this is it's just like solid. Like you can pick this thing up and you are like, this is a pan. If you do that at home, it just might energize you. You don't know what's going to happen next. Life just gets a little bit more exciting after that. So our pan is heating. A little bit of unfamiliarized non-stick cooking spray. I'm going to add, a handful is not a measurement, so we're going to say about 2 cups of my oyster mushrooms, about 2 cups of my gnocchi mushrooms, and add another cup of my brown biche mushrooms. So bring up to temperature. Let's add 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil or oil of your choice. And what we want to do is start to draw the moisture out and develop a browning around the mushrooms. Just like any other vegetable or plant product, really, when we develop browning, we develop flavor. And we add a flavor that isn't there without the browning, which isn't there without the cooking. You know, I'm not against any sort of philosophy of eating, any sort of approach towards what makes you feel awesome. But I did actually a raw diet for about 2.5 months. And it was easier because I was living in Hawaii. But one of the things that you notice when you're eating raw food is the taste isn't developed. You can have very flavorful foods. You can have really interesting contrasts and combinations, but nothing jumps out onto the palate. And that's why, if you think about it, humans are the only species that cooks its food. All species eat, but we're the only ones who apply heat and fire to make food taste a certain way. Certain foods like tomatoes actually have more health properties when cooked, but most foods lose some of their enzymes and may lose some of their nutritional value as well. Who knows, right? I don't know. I don't have a meter on my arm that tells me ingesting this. I go by more how I feel. And if a food makes me feel good, I'm probably going to keep eating it. If it doesn't make me feel like I want to, I'm probably not going to keep eating it. But when I eat foods that are well cooked, I enjoy them more. That's kind of why, one of the reasons I learned to cook, right? I still wanted to get all the nutritional benefits. I wanted to get all the awesomeness that I could, but I wanted that awesomeness to taste good too. So when you're cooking your mushrooms, don't just rush it and be like, oh, they're cooked now. Develop a really nice brown color, and that will add to your final product. So add a little bit of salt to draw the moisture out to help develop the browning. And as your mushrooms get to a nice brown color, a nice golden brown, add in your ginger. Stir that in. We want to get some color on that as well. Need be, you're going to add a little bit more oil as necessary. 1 or 2 more tablespoons. And we just want to get everything basically coated. We want to get everything browning. Developing color, again, equals flavor. Creating a homogeneous mixture, make sure everything gets cooked evenly. We don't want to end up with something that's under or overcooked, and especially burning. Here's my roast garlic paste, which I've made ahead of time. And we're going to add 1 cup of that roast garlic paste, also known as gold. You can sell it a lot now. People are trying to buy your gold. Just bring them some garlic paste and see what happens. Put a story up on chefkas.com about your experience. And if they have a problem, just tell them Chef Kas saying it. But if you make any profits, I definitely want 10%. Okay. The garlic paste, because it's already cooked, you want to make sure that you're stirring constantly and being careful not to burn. Get that mixture homogenized. And that's basically just 100% flavor. I need to get that on a t-shirt. Chef Kas, 100% flavor. Can we write that down? Yeah. Next step is I've got my goat here, seared off, and I'm going to take some tongs and put that into my mixture, incorporating that, and make sure that you stir as you go. You can even turn down the heat a little bit as necessary, just for these few moments that you are putting in your meat. A simpler way to do this might be just to hold up the whole tray and dump it in. That will be in next week's video. And all these little pieces of bone too are just going to add flavor. Also, some people like to eat goat bones. There's a legend about that keeps away zombies, and there are a lot of people right now fearing a zombie apocalypse. I don't know what that's about. That's just weird. I think that's just a weird thing that's going on right now. So I added in 3 cups of a tomatillo pico de gallo, and you can get the recipe for that on this website or on chefkas.com. And we want to make sure again that everything is coated evenly, and you want that those pieces of goat basically to be drowning in your mixture. If you need to use a bigger pan, that's totally appropriate. This one is just going to be about big enough. Next, we're adding in our seasonings. We've got 3 tablespoons of curry powder, 3 tablespoons of cumin, 3 tablespoons of red chili powder, 1 tablespoon of red chili flakes, 2 tablespoons of crushed black pepper, and we're going to use salt to taste. And what I want to do is I want this to get all evenly mixed together. I want to coat especially the goat meat in the mushrooms, the garlic, the tomatoes, the onion, and develop a color basically consistently throughout. So after your curry has cooked down quite a bit, you develop a little bit of browning on the mixture around the goat, and the goat is all thoroughly mixed in with our mixture. You're going to add some carrots, about 2 to 3 cups, and you're going to get those mixed in there as well, because if you can develop a little bit of browning on the outside of the carrot, it's only going to add more flavor. If you're using a smaller cooking vessel such as this, make sure that you're getting everything from the bottom. The best way to do that is to turn it by tossing. You can see at the bottom a lot of color has developed, so I have to reincorporate that so none of it burns. Keeping in mind that now at the bottom I have more cooking directly on the heat as well. So incorporating what has already been browned, already developed flavor, and then moving around again. When you've sufficiently developed the color to your liking, and this is almost the type of thing where keep cooking it. Time is the secret ingredient. Time is really, there's no substitute for it. The more time, the more attention you put into the dish, the better it's going to come out. If you develop a dark golden brown all the way around, it's going to be an incredible end result. At this point though, if you need to save some time, because our curry is still going to cook for a little while as a braised dish as well, we're going to add in about 4 cups of water, but we're not really looking for a quantity of water. We more want to have all of the goat. That was next week's episode. See next week's episode, Chef Kas's trip to the zoo. So we are going to incorporate all of the goat, all of the carrots, basically underneath, submerged, at least in part. We could submerge it completely, but for this, what we want to do instead is just continue to move it around. You're going to bring it up to a boil, down to a simmer, and then cover. We're going to let this cook for approximately 30 to 45 minutes, or until the goat is nice and tender, so it's falling apart, and we will serve it at that time. Finally, for our plating, our polenta cakes are nice and brown on both sides. I'm going to scoop under that real quickly. Try to get the whole thing on your spatula. I'm going to put that right in the center of your plate there. Okay? Now you can have the option of going with the salmon or the goat curry, but actually what we're going to do today is a little bit of both. And we're going to do sort of a Chef Kas style surf and turf with our fish off to one side and goat meat on the other. And there we have the Chef Kas surf and turf with Bengali goat curry and pesto seared salmon over a sun-dried tomato goat cheese polenta cake. Thank you. This has been Chef Kas, Cooking with Chef Kas. We'll see you next time. Do 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 do.